Blog Talk Radio. Welcome to the Institute for Personal Development, Kriya Yoga Ashram, where total consciousness is the new frontier.
Kriya Yoga is union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices to initiate this process.
Good morning. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's Talk Consciousness. I am your hostess, Lisa Winton, and with me is Kenny Toy, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of the Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Good morning, Swami. Thank you for being here today. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing pretty good today. How about you?
Well, I'm doing pretty good today, thanks. And I want to thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Today on the Voice of Yoga, we will talk about the new moon on October 19th, 2017, at 3:13 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is a new beginning. This lunation is in opposition to Uranus and Aries and may bring cooperation with new insights. Listen as we discuss the difference between a thought and an idea. The show will explain the benefits of producing harmony with divine law seeking expression. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. We are talking consciousness. Join the Kriya Yoga spiritual advance. Get the light in your soul and create harmony with divine law. So, Swami, I looked up and got some ideas to talk about idea and thought, and here's what I've come up with. Idea refers to a plan or a process that occurs in the mind in relation to the completion of a work or duty. Thought, on the other hand, is a mental process that keeps on going in the mind unabated. That's the main difference between the two words idea and thought. And then another description I've had is, I thought this was pretty good. Thought paves the way for an idea. This is the truth. Thoughts should combine to form an idea. In other words, an idea is formed by the combination of thoughts about a particular problem. So one thing I thought was interesting is that after thought paves the way for an idea, the sentence after that is, this is the truth. And I think we have other descriptions for that particular word as well. But why don't you give us your take on idea and thought as it relates to Kriya Yoga and our spiritual development?
Yeah, in this model, the difference between a thought and an idea is that a thought really is limited to the function of the material mortal mind. Pretty much comes from sensual perception, whereas ideas are more related to the immortal divine mind, and they're more grounded in the concept of truth. That anything that comes that is an idea is principle centered, means that it's backed by divine law. So actually, when this description that I have where it says thought paves way for an idea, this is the truth, really we look at that completely different, and it's really idea is the truth. Truth meaning coming from spirit. Correct. And that there's a difference between lower mind and higher mind in this model, third house, ninth house type of thinking. And the more we delve into it, the more we see how important it is to understand that there's a difference. And just as we move on in this whole thing, that everything we talk about is the interplay between matter, mind, and spirit, because that's where most of our collisions are going to happen. So the descriptions that I've discussed earlier about thought and idea really are coming from the mortal mind, material way of thinking, and not the spiritual way of thinking. Correct. That's the way I would see that too. And so we're using the terms to help us understand the theories that we're working with. And this new moon that's going to happen is symbolic of a new beginning, making it a great time to start something new. And the first thing that I notice about this chart is that there isn't any major aspect that is applying. This means there isn't any dynamic focus
to the lunation. So it puts the emphasis on the new moon, which is the partile aspect, the sun and the moon, which is in the 8th house and in Libra. The 8th house is the house of transformation, renewal, and the cycle of death and rebirth. But everything is dependent upon our perspective. It all depends on how we look at life, if we are material, mental, or spiritual. If we have material beliefs, mental beliefs, or spiritual beliefs, is going to determine just how you interpret the 8th house. The 8th house, to somebody who is attached to particles, is really the cycle of death and rebirth. And their individuality is pretty much consumed by the fact that they're victims. Everything is happening to them. And then somebody who has attachment to waves, the things that are invisible but tangible, then that person basically has mortal mental beliefs. And this supports the concept that the individual creates their reality with thoughts, and life is a mix of good and evil. Of course, somebody who desires the void or the nothing, the invisible, intangible source of sustenance, that's somebody who has immortal spiritual beliefs. This is our true nature, and it reports only what is eternal and good. And so everything really is dependent upon my level of consciousness, my degree of awareness, when it comes to trying to understand ourselves.
And so we also need to, if we take the idea of, I don't mean to say the word idea, if we take the definition of thought and idea, if we use those different levels that you were talking about, we would have a different perception on thought and idea as well.
Right. It changes everything. And the thing that we start to learn about spiritual understanding is that's really valuable about it is just like when the tide comes in, it lifts all the boats. Or when you're making bread and you put a little bit of yeast in the mix, it leavens all of the dough, that everything rises. And that's the thing that's really important about divine mind, is any advancement we get in that direction, it affects everything. So it lifts our perspective. It changes our perception. And it affects all the departments in our lives.
Now, I can sense that there would be people out there that would ask you, well, how do I know if what I'm thinking is a thought or that I have an idea, meaning from the divine? How do we tell the difference?
Well, the main thing is that anything that comes from the divine is what we call principle-centered. So it has to be in harmony with divine law, which means that it comes under the jurisdiction of the kingdom of heaven. So it must be, first of all, it has to support life. It has to be positive, moving in a positive lifeward direction. It has to support peace, harmony, love, happiness, goodness. Those could possibly be ideas. Now, you can have thoughts that stem from that, and they will be backed by divine law. But if your thoughts are in discord with peace, love, happiness, and goodness, then of course they can't be ideas.
So we have a thought that, I'm going to use the word negative, that has a negative connotation to it, whatever, then we know that's coming from a mortal mind, a mortal perception, and definitely not from somebody who is at that moment connected to their divinity.
Right, or is reflecting divine law. And that's a big part of what I think this new moon might be the new beginning for most of us, is to really try and make that conversion where we go from living our lives from limiting material beliefs to liberating spiritual beliefs.
So how do we go about to do that? What does it look like when we do it? How do we do it?
Well, that's the union of the individual with the divine. That you start to establish your sense of well-being based on a relationship with spirit and not matter, which means that we're not getting all of our comprehensive clues from the outside world anymore. That you recognize that the outside world is dualistic, it is mortal, it's provisional, it's temporary. And it's not really reliable, it's not truth. And it's an interesting thing that even astrologically, using astrology, sometimes to give us insight into the simple fact that sometimes what our senses are showing us isn't real, isn't right. Like, say, for example, if you go down to the ocean and you watch the sunrise. Now, as you watch it, it appears that the sun is rising and you're remaining still. But in reality, the sun is remaining still and it's the earth that is turning. So we're not really getting an accurate report from our external environment. And that's where the whole concept of even using astrology as a spiritual science can be very helpful. And a lot of it has to do with how you perceive the movement of the celestial bodies and what they represent for you.
So it's like anything, we have to first have this awareness, and then from there, then we can monitor ourselves. We can monitor our thoughts and monitor our actions to determine if they are of those divine qualities. Correct.
And then also with the practice of Kriya Yoga, where you learn to control your mind and use your creativity, use your imagination, you can actually start to generate and manifest things that would be principle-centered, backed by truth, as opposed to using the information that we get from our external sensual perception and then trying to make sense of it from that.
Well, I think that's a good place to pause right now. So listeners, we're going to hear a word from our sponsors. We'll be back with you shortly.
Kriya Yoga Theory 2 is a unique and revolutionary practice and forum designed to facilitate the growth process in human development. Apotheosis is a real experience and has an evidence procedure. You cannot lead someone to permanent change by doing for them what they must do themselves. Personal accountability and responsibility are the foundation of Kriya Yoga Theory 2. You must be engaged and devoted. Prana power brings virtue to overcome fear, wisdom to overcome ignorance, purpose to overcome selfishness, enthusiasm to overcome laziness. Kriya Yoga is a path of action, knowledge, and devotion. These sessions are a celestial positioning system to guide the individual into union with the divine. For more information or to sign up for your next session online, go to www.ipdtransform.com. Namaste. Welcome back. For those of you just joining us, you're listening to The Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. So, Swami, the name of this radio show this week is called New Moon in Libra Brings Balance. So what can you tell us about Libra and this new moon that maybe we could get some information to help us on our spiritual development?
Well, Libra is the sign of relationship and balance. In fact, the symbol for Libra is the scales, and how to regulate and distribute anything for that matter. And it also plays out a lot in, like what I said, relationships. This particular new moon is a really good time because of the opposition to Uranus to get that new insight and the whole thing of developing a relationship with the divine. So having a relationship with a resource that is more reliable than the outside world. That is the benefit of spiritual understanding, is that you're using a resource that is perfect, it's ever satisfying, and it always succeeds. So with regard to developing this relationship with the divine, with something that is pure, powerful, sacred, and productive of peace, love, happiness, and goodness, is something that you really might want to look at or look into for this particular new moon, new beginning.
So we want to try to, as you said before, put these seeds in the ground. So we want to try to make our intentions really clear in relationships and things having to do with Libra.
Yeah, but not necessarily just any relationship. Like I say, if you have a primary relationship with the divine, it changes the dynamics of interpersonal relationships. In fact, a lot of people use relationships for support. Physical relationships, external relationships. And in this model, that's not really advantageous because you're putting too much weight on something that can't withstand the burden. Going to fail. It's going to collapse at some time. Whereas this primary relationship with the divine changes the exchange of energy that we have on an intimate and an interpersonal level with relationship. On one dimension, if you don't have this primary relationship, then you're using external relationships for support. So you're drawing off of them. And then they become control dramas because you're drawing from a resource of energy that's exhaustible. It's limited. It's not really going to give you what it is that you're looking for, so it's not satisfying, and it's going to fail. Whereas if you have a primary relationship with the divine, now your exchange of energy on an intimate and an interpersonal level is that you're not drawing off, you're giving back. That you have a connection with a resource that's inexhaustible. And that's the concept of love, to be able to unconditionally give. And of course, if you are tapped into a resource that's inexhaustible, then you can give without any expectation or any need for any return.
And you would want to do that, well, like you said, with no expectations, no need for a return. You would do it naturally anyway, without any thought of getting anything in return.
Right. And then plus, when you have that relationship with that resource, then it lifts your sense of perception. It expands your identity beyond seeing yourself as separate. So again, what you're putting out, you realize is really what you're doing unto yourself. Because the same soul that animates me is animating you. And what I do to what's around me, I'm doing to myself. And I like myself. Mm-hmm. And so from this vantage point, and you're giving out truth, which is virtuous, principle-centered behavior, rooted in peace, love, happiness, goodness.
It's interesting to hear you talk about astrology this way, because when I was growing up, my idea of astrology was reading my horoscope in the newspaper. And so this is very eye-opening, and I'm sure it will be for a lot of our listeners out there to really understand that there is a science behind all of this.
Well, originally, astrology is or was a spiritual science. And I have a quote here from Paramahansa Yogananda, which may actually help a little bit. He says, "The wise man defeats his planets, which is to say his past, by transferring his allegiance from the creation to the Creator. The more he realizes his unity with Spirit, the less his domination by matter. The soul is ever free. It is deathless because birthless. It cannot be regimented by stars. If you live by astrology or anything else, you will be bound by it. Depend wholly and solely on God. Live by God alone, and then nothing can hurt you." So that concept of resting on the divine, turning over your whole sense of well-being to divine law, is a spiritual concept. Now, astrology being a spiritual science, sure, you can look at it from a particles level of awareness, but you can also look at it from a mental level of awareness, or as we were saying, you can also look at astrology as a spiritual science, as a way of uncovering concealed deity that becomes the meeting point of all of our sciences. This whole concept of divine, God, is really, to me, that's the ultimate unknown. And then, of course, once you have attention for it, initially you need some sort of belief in it. But then once you can join with it, once you can feel connected to this invisible, intangible resource, then you're in bedrock, that you're drawing from the Almighty.
Because when you're reading that quote, I was definitely getting the sense that he was actually talking about the material world and the spiritual world, the divine world. I mean, that's what I got out of that too. And to when you rely on anything material, then that's what you're bound to. I think that's what he was talking about. I mean, that's how I took that.
Yeah, and the concept there is that you're in error. The term was called sin. You're missing the mark. You're drawing from the wrong energy field. You're drawing from the wrong source of sustenance. Nothing intrinsically evil with it, but it's not going to give you the return that all of the books are talking about.
That's interesting. So how do we go about making sure everything that we think, because we were talking about thought earlier and ideas, we want to make sure that we are thinking with this divine sense, divine law. We want to have that expression. So how do we make sure that we do all that? Is it as simple as thinking before we speak, or how do we train our minds to make sure that we're thinking the right way?
Well, that's what we say in yoga. You train your mind to serve spirit. And the concept of rising above duality and transcending the cycle of death and rebirth becomes a viable human enterprise. And it's contingent upon whatever it is that we desire. As it says in the Bible, where you find your treasure, so your heart will be. That whatever it is that we esteem as valuable. And that's the beauty of what I consider to be the practice of Kriya Yoga that we teach, is that we put this concept of spirit in its position of importance in our value system. That it is the most important thing that we need to sustain our lives. But it's invisible and it's intangible. And of course, if you do not have attention for that, then you're attached to either something visible and tangible or something invisible but tangible. It's either particles or waves, matter or mind that you're drawing from. But as we have been saying, that's duality. It's fear and limitation. It's not going to give you what it is that you're looking for, which is liberation, freedom, truth.
Now, in the summary of the show, we said that we would explain the benefits of producing harmony with divine law-seeking expression. So to me, it sounds like if we're drawing from the wrong energy field, as you say, that is really going to limit us from developing that harmony.
Right, and that will produce discord. So our beliefs in limiting material, mortal concepts, our belief in sickness, sin, suffering, that's in discord with peace, love, happiness, and goodness. It's in discord with the immortal divine mind. It's in discord with the human being, the image and likeness of the divine. And so our only real solution is to harmonize ourselves with peace, love, happiness, and goodness, which means that we have to let go of a lot of our limiting concepts, our limiting beliefs.
Yeah, and isn't that going to be the challenge for us? It always seems to be that, I say that in every radio show, there is a challenge for us to be able to move forward on our spiritual path, but we do have to let go some of this older baggage in order for us to do that.
Right. And that's where I think the practice of yoga is, an excellent platform to work with. Skillful use of thought, skillful use of breath, skillful use of water, skillful use of food, skillful use of exercise. Gives you tangible things that you can work with and start to change how you think, how you feel, and how you perform. But you also have to do it spiritually, training the mind to serve spirit. Skillful use of thought is the most important component in the equation. Am I thinking right? Do I put God first? Do I rest on ever-present, infinite, divine law?
Well, I think this is probably a good place to end our program. So listeners, in closing, I'd like to invite you to please visit the website. It's www.ipdtransform.com. So once you're there, you can make comments about this show or post and give us ideas about future shows you would like us to do. But do keep those comments, questions, and curiosities coming because we do enjoy hearing from you. And be sure to tune in next week. We're going to have a great show for you. We will be celebrating United Nations Day, and also we'll be talking about the sun going into Scorpio on October 23rd. And also be sure to tune in to our Facebook Live sessions we have Wednesday nights at 5 p.m. So Swami, is there any other final thoughts or comments you'd like to give our listeners about this program today?
Well, I would like to wish everybody a pleasant new beginning on this new moon, and hopefully being able to apply some of the concepts and suggestions that we've offered here in this show. And with that, I'll wish everybody a good day.
And thank you for listening to our program, The Voice of Yoga. This is Lisa Winton along with Swami Jayananda signing off. Have a wonderful Kriya Yoga kind of day. Namaste.